Welcome to Spectacle on Television Nigeria. I am your host, Daniel Atai. This week is still the week where we commemorate the activities of international human rights, and today we want to actually discuss the civil aspect of human rights in Nigeria. Welcome to Spectacle. I am Daniel Atai, your host, and with me in the studio to analyze on this particular topic is Tope Fashwa. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Topes Fashwa is an international human rights activist and also a political activist and a social commentator. Without much ado about the topic, we know you are grounded with this particular topic of discussion. The Human Rights Day has just been celebrated and is still ongoing, and is an international day where the United Nations have set aside that we commemorate and reflect on the activities of human rights. It ranges from two covenants, the social-economic covenant, and that is cultural also, and the civil and political covenant of the Human Rights Charter. I want us to discuss on the civil aspect of the Human Rights Charter. How far and how well has Nigeria gone in this administration of President Muhammad Buhari?
Well, thank you for inviting me. I think it's a bit tough to discuss that within the ambit of a certain regime, because the issues involved in human rights, and especially the civil aspect of it, transcends any particular regime. These are very major issues and, massive global issues. The history of the International Human Rights Charter of the United Nations, especially which came after the Second World War, was to say that was to agree on how human beings should be treated. And it was a major pushback because we're talking about an era that we still had quite a bit of racism, and some people felt that what was the point? There was also gender bias and so on. If you remember that even in the United States, in their first constitutional draft, what they assumed was that the black person was 70% human. Not quite fully, yes. And of course, so if you look at that, the pushback towards that kind of thinking was gradual. And after a very expensive war in terms of human lives had happened in the Second World War, they still came together. People came together from all over the world. And at least, the truth is also, if we look at it very well, the protagonists of some of these ideas are quite magnanimous, because to a certain extent, we could still have been living in that era where, the blacks are considered 70% human, women are not meant to vote, they have no mind of their own, and all of that. And of course, there's all that classism, that racism, that caste system, where in some society they believe these ones are, the aristocrats, these ones are middle class, these ones are untouchables, and all of that. So it's difficult to discuss within the ambit of the Buhari government. What we can see, though, is unfortunately that the government has kind of shot itself in the foot a couple of times. We know what some of the issues are. And just now I was reading the comment from the vice president, who said that he was offered an award by the Wole Soyinka Foundation or so, and he said, in view of what has happened to Mr. Shore in the court and the manhandling by the DSS and arresting someone within the court building out of some desperation, and also when you look at the amount of force that is displayed towards one citizen who is not a terrorist. Even I heard that they're trying to accuse him with terrorism. For I don't know where that's going to come from. But what we've seen is that there's this ability of the state to trump up charges against people who they don't like. They're not deploying their efforts towards solving the real problems of society. For example, crime. When you look at a certain citizen, yes, he may speak out of hand sometimes, and he may speak angrily, and I must say that also that's the sin of the youth. When you're young, you speak, and
youthful exuberance.
Yes, and you have to give it to him, and that's the thing sometimes. And however, if you say we're going to show him that you can't stand against the state, and someone is saying, l'état c'est moi, I am the state, and we are the state. Even though the president hasn't said anything like that per se, but people have said it on his behalf. Someone say, "Who are you? You can't, we are the state, and you cannot." People don't know or don't remember that this issue of power is pretty much transient. So we've seen some of those things happen, and I think there's been a rollback in terms of human rights of late. Of course, you can see also that the government of Nigeria, not only the executive, even the legislature, they're boxing themselves in. So you come out with a social media bill, you come out with a hate speech bill, and all of those things are geared towards giving the people in government more power to accuse any citizen that they don't like, and keep them in jail, or even if they're cool. One chap was suggesting that people should be hung and should be killed summarily or taken to the firing squad at this age and time for saying something that someone in government doesn't like. So it's highly unfortunate. What I see is the paranoia is growing. People are these guys in government who happen, a lot of them who were nobodies yesterday, no pedigree, they've never done anything for this country. They play the prebendal politics that we play in Nigeria, and suddenly they find themselves in this position, and the next thing is they see themselves as demigods. They want to box themselves in and alienate the people. It's bad enough that when they get there, they use the taxpayers' money to buy their big cars and bulletproof cars and shut out the people, and they are no longer accessible. Now they are trying to use the instrument of the law to create this barrier, this real barrier between themselves and the people of this country. So, I think 2 or 3 of those laws are floating around now, and some of them are moving with much speed. If it was that, laws that would actually uplift the humanity of the people of this country would move at such a speed, we probably would not have this kind of problem that we have with our country. But if there's a law that generally polishes the ego of people in government, or a law that kind of alienates and, accuses, innocent citizens, those are the kind of laws that are floating across in Nigeria.
Now, if you look around the administration again, because we owe the people the agenda setting, and we also set some certain blueprints for government to follow. Would you say that apart from some abuses, like you did mention, from contempt of court and so on, the civil society of Nigeria, especially in the hands of state governments, could you say that they are faring where their rights have been respected, from salary issue, allowance issue, health issues, let me say basic amenities?
Right. No, you mean the civil society within government?
Yeah, within government. The civil.
When you say civil society, one's mind drifts to NGOs and civil society organizations.
No, not civil society.
But you mean just
the
civilian population?
Yeah.
Of course, they aren't doing well enough, and we could do a lot better. As an economist, I always remind people what it's all about. That when you come together to form a state, and when we move away from that Hobbesian state of mind, where life is brutish, short, and nasty, where people take revenge for sins committed against them immediately, with now recourse to the state, and everybody vests their right to defend themselves. and to carry arms and invest that, right back in the state. That is what is called a civil society. And, however, what we've seen is a mismanagement of our resources over time, such that everybody in Nigeria is back to defending themselves, creating your own security, getting your own policemen, doing your own water borehole and bringing your own electricity. So you then wonder, what are we in the union for? So that's it. It's a big issue, and Nigerians aren't faring well. I was discussing with someone just yesterday or this morning. There's this incident of unfortunate incidents of the MD of Maersk in Lagos, whose wife was killed and by assailants, some of whom they probably know. And the man is critically ill in some condition in the hospital because he was stabbed as well. And somebody raised an issue about, we should make sure that we're paying these people well. And they mentioned about 35,000. If you can pay your people 35,000 to 60,000, we'll be fine. And I'm thinking that, look, what we're missing here, because we don't discuss the big issues. The fact is that 35,000 even to 60,000 is nothing compared to what people need to live on, number one. Number two is that we're not even figuring the impact of inflation on these salaries over time. Number three, we live in a much more capitalist society where, staff are being casualized and so on, while the salaries of the CEOs are growing. We probably have a couple of CEOs in this country whose salaries are over $1 billion every year, apart from maybe allowances or the deals that they can do and so on. And, so these guys that are working for you are seeing what you're earning. Some of the things we require or request from them, the kind of behaviors and attitudes we request from them, even we wouldn't be able to offer if we were in that scenario, in that situation. So, in many parts of Nigeria, unfortunately also, states, salaries are being owed, pensions are being owed, the pensions are being mismanaged. One of the most callous things to do is to embezzle somebody's pension, because sometimes, in the contributory scheme, they've taken some of your salary and the employer has added their own and they've kept it in a certain place for that thing to be managed well and to yield. So whether you're the PFA and you're not doing well with people's pension and you're paying yourself some large salary because you're the CEO of the PFA, you're actually, taking from someone's sweat over time. In France, as I speak, about 800,000 people are demonstrated in a couple of days back over the issue of pension laws, and they were going to change some pension laws. So these things are very serious issues, if you ask me. But certainly we know that Nigerians aren't doing well. If they were doing well, number one, we wouldn't have the highest level of income inequality in the world. 157 position out of 157 countries surveyed by the Oxfam. We wouldn't have the highest incidence of poverty in the world, according to the poverty clock, which is funded by the United Nations. Even though our government would want us to ignore some of those indices, some of those numbers, but I don't think we should ignore them. I think these numbers are real, and something needs to be done about that. We won't have youth unemployment in the region of 50%. So the woes are there. We know what's going on. Very little governance gets done in this country on a good day. So that means that governance is about the people. Governance is about the vulnerable. Governance is, yes, of course, the rich people in society need to be protected in order to enjoy their money. But governance, when you wake up, you're in government, maybe as a president, governor, and all of that, when you wake up, what you should think about every day is, what do I do to uplift the lowest of people in this state today? That should be because you should be focused at that, and that's the background, that's the foundation. So, oftentimes I see scenarios where people in government like to deal with the guys at the top. They're inviting them to cocktails, they have committees, they invite those people, they're clinking glasses, backslapping, and say, we're engaging with the business community, we want foreign investors, and so on. You're not fixing the foundation. The foundation are those poorest people. They're the foundation of, number one, they're more in number, Number two, the society rests on them because they're more in number. Whatever they do is what defines the society. So when you go to CNN and say, oh, why is CNN coming to Makoko to cover life in Makoko? Why don't they go to VGC or Ikoyi and Co? It's because that's where most of our people live. The UN rapporteur on housing just left Nigeria about 4 weeks ago, and she wrote what could probably be our worst report. That 70% of Nigerians crawl out of ghettos every day. Sometimes we don't even know that those places are ghetto because they're so normal to us. When you live in a place where there's no government services, no water, no light, you buy your own generator, nobody cares about how you dispose your solid waste and so on. You're living in your own stench. There's no planning. You can't even, for you to get to your house, you have to navigate different stuff and so on and so forth. Then, of course, you're living in a ghetto. And so the United Nations took notice of that. So 70% in a country such as ours, and in a country where we also have this habit of building luxury houses all over the place, many of them are not occupied. Over perhaps 500,000 to 1 million. City. Yes, to 1 million housing units in this country are unoccupied, and most of them are, top-notch property. It is what we call in economics, debt capital, because you have taken capital that you could otherwise deploy for the creation of more productivity. You start it out down in one house, in one brick and mortar. So we need to actually leverage beyond the whole idea of what defines a man is the kind of big cars he drives or parks in his yard, or the kind of big houses he's able to build for himself. Life is a lot bigger than that, and I think there's something calling us right now to really define the way we see life as a people.
And what is that?
I don't know. I mean, there's several forces calling us right now.
Okay.
Calling us right now, pointing to the fact that, if you look at the part of what we're saying, that, in Iran, people are demonstrating right now. In Iraq, in Chile, Santiago, in Venezuela, in Bolivia.
Civil action.
Yes. In fact, I just read an article, though written by, I think it was John Perkins, and it says, "Welcome to the global pushback or fight against neoliberalism." That if we look at the sporadic nature of some of the things that are going on around the world, we see there's kind of a pushback. Though I wish the guys who are pushing back luck, because usually they don't have money, they don't have the capital. So when you don't have capital in this world, oftentimes a lot of what you do, we end up in frustration. But we must give it to them that they've even tried at all. They've tried at all to raise their voices and say, we can't continue like this on behalf of the most vulnerable in society. Even back home, I think that from what I've read from Shore, for example, he doesn't have to be perfect. Most prophets in history have not been perfect. But Mali said also that, sang in his song, "How long shall they kill our prophet?" These prophets, why we stand aside on them. Yeah. So, and I told some guys over the weekend, when the great prophets were here, Prophet Muhammad, or even Jesus Christ, most people did not believe in them, because they had cause to say, this guy is fake. Is he not that guy that I knew that was living in that place? Is he not that guy that did this thing yesterday? And that's why it said in the Bible, can anything good come out of Nazareth? But when I listen to someone like that, I see he's talking about the most vulnerable in society. And I look at the same society and nobody seems to be talking about that. And in fact, to make matters worse, we now live in a society where most of the young people believe that, what's the point engaging with activism? When we were growing up in the 70s, 80s, and even parts of the 90s, there was a lot more activism, all right? We had the Fela Kuti always giving government problem. We had the Gani Fayemi always giving government problem. Even during the days of colonialism, we had the Aba women's riots, the pushback against taxes. We have people like Margaret Echo.
Was it actually a problem of trying to protest for governance?
Yes. Okay. In those days, we had the Fumilayo around some Kuti. They were fighting for women's rights in this country and say that women can vote, women should be able to express themselves. Yeah. Where are they today? I said we have people like Joe Dumaki still trying in our corner, but we're getting fewer and fewer. Now we seem to be a people that's more given to glamour now. You have to be on point. dissipating energy on Instagram, showing off how beautiful you are, how fine, or what car you bought, and all of that stuff. Yeah, it's shallow. And the truth is that if we could project into the future, we should be telling these youths that okay, just watch for what is the upshot and the result of the way you're living your life now. And what are you building for the future? As a matter of fact, we won't be here today, but for the sacrifices of those, forefathers and foremothers, if you like, you know what I'm saying. Now, if people like Rosa Parks hadn't insisted on not moving from that front of the bus to the back, right? Today, Nigerians, with all the money they have,
America.
When we go to America, in fact, we'll sit at the back of the plane. We will sit at the back of the plane. So there's value. There's value in activism. There's value in people agitating for more human rights for human rights and protesting and saying, look, it could be better. No matter what state, the biggest room in the world is a room for improvement. There's value in it. Right. But what we're seeing these days, and of course sometimes with government sponsorship, is this attempt to criminalize that activism, is that attempt to make it look like it's treason itself. And everybody is now scared, everybody is keeping quiet, everybody is tucking themselves in their houses, and they're telling you that all that matters is to make more money. Let's go and meet these guys, let's parley with them, let's grab our own. I mean, it's a terrible situation. Yeah.
All right. You've spoken much, and you explicitly explained the factors from the human rights charters we are discussing. And maybe after this time out, I'll come again to ask you what is fundamentally wrong with our institutions of human rights, from the Constitution and so on. Stay tuned with us after this short break.
The issue here we have to begin to look at is that at the time of independence, I don't know if there was a trajectory to where we are going to.
How could it be that credible, free and fair under manual conduct of election?
That is where our problem lies, and that is why people are now saying that, advising that we should move, that the world has gone into digital. We should move from the manual to the digital.
We cannot keep doing same thing and expecting a different result.
The only way you create jobs from your ministry is that you have to encourage local content.
If you look at the profile of Sally Mama,
there is a caveat in this leave given to him. He should seek medical help if he's fine.
Welcome to Spectacle on Television Nigeria. Welcome back. We're still talking about civil rights in respect to the Nigerian government as we commemorate with the Human Rights Day, International Human Rights Day. And with me in the studio has been Tope Fashua, an international human rights activist and also a political one too, and he's a social commentator. Yeah, as we're going on that break, I said, what is the fundamental, or what is fundamentally wrong with the African continent in the abuse of human rights and the charters?
We've signed up to many of those charters, but unfortunately we've had scenarios where we've had insecure leaders. Many of them never want to leave once they're there. I mean, unfortunately, we had this scenario with, many of them.
I also want to ask the Constitution, or the constitutional framework. Right. Does it pave way for human rights abuse, or is actually a watchdog?
I wouldn't think so. As a matter of fact, I think that of course, constitutions are written by men, right? And again, no law is perfect. So no matter what you write, people will try to exploit it. But what we've seen is what scares one is many times the deliberate attempt to ignore the Constitution. So, for example, we have a scenario where instead of the normal judiciary, executive, legislature dichotomy of government, you see many times the executive barging into for example, in this country, we had a point where the SS men went and invaded the houses of judges in the middle of the night. And that was, of course, the SS guys are reporting to the presidency, to the executive. So the executive went and invaded the judiciary in the middle of the night and cowed some of these old judges. Imagine if a 70-year-old
their house is not the
their house,
not the court of
yes,
law.
it's bad enough. It's egregious, if you ask me. When you have a 70-year-old, 72-year-old man, you start to break his doors, you're wearing balaclavas in the middle of the night, he could actually throw a fit and just get a heart attack and die. What's that for? If you were intelligent and you wanted to nail him on one or two things, I believe that there are better ways to do that. So it's that act, that impunity. Our real problem in this country is impunity, not the law, not the breaking of law. And impunity is this idea that you're above the law, you can get away with anything because you have the power. And of course, you see, our people love that power. Even Lord Lugard said it, that the kind of African he met within the Nigerian space were people who love power, but not the responsibilities that come with power. So we like to grab the power and all of that. So it's a very, very interesting phenomenon. The bottom line is that, again, in terms of the Constitution, it depends on the country how you want to run it. When people talk about different issues in the Constitution, I say there's nothing wrong in having a dynamic Constitution. Since no law is going to be perfect, every time you're observing that law, you're reading it, you're seeing how people are exploiting the law, you're tweaking the law to block areas. Sometimes when you block, it creates new problems.
How do you do that? Through the National Assembly?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, that's it, through the people. So the people must be aware. However, the instrument that the politicians have against that is the instrument of poverty. So they want to keep everybody so poor that you wouldn't have time to sit down and analyze the Constitution and analyze the laws and say, okay, this one we should do, but we're going to move and tell our senator that this one needs to be tweaked, this one needs to be tweaked. And even when you're able to do that, you're unable to get consensus, So it starts with the people being aware. However, so what I always say is this: the few people who are not, abjectly poor, the few people who are enlightened, the few people who are exposed, the few people who God has blessed them to be able to have 1 or 2 naira in their accounts. And they must understand that society rests on them more than anyone else. So earlier on we spoke about the foundation of society, these millions of people at the base, all right? Yeah. But where the society makes progress is not at that level, because at that level, these people need help. Yes. So what they need is fortification, some sort of help to allow some of them grow into the middle class and then up that way. So what we're seeing is, in this country, so much population at that base, a few, in the middle there, and a tiny few on top. And it's a very, if you like, it's a very fragile structure that we have. So what we need is that middle class people are the ones that think for society, because they're not so breached, such as to try to protect everything they have and to protect the status quo. But they're just rich enough and poor enough to be able to think about where society should go. So we should have, I would propose a much more dynamic constitution. There's absolutely nothing wrong if we review that constitution every year or every 3 years. And all of these issues we're talking about, restructuring and all sorts of injustices that's going on in the country and people agitating for a better structure, all of those things should be written into the Constitution to the extent that, look, this Constitution will be reviewed this often. So you don't have to call a huge constitutional conference, which itself many times doesn't have basis in law. So when you call a constitutional conference, many times you have a scenario where the National Assembly is saying, these guys are doing our job. Who elected them? On what basis have we selected them? And that's what happened with 2014. Yeah. Though a president may decide to go ahead and implement what they say, but what we saw in the 2014 one, unfortunately, was that the president did not do that. And now the document is moribund.
Now, if the document is moribund, like you talked about, a constant review of the Constitution, do you think the restructuring that President Muhammad Buhari is calling for now. I think 2 days
Is he
ago.
calling for?
2 days ago, I heard him talking about we can restructure if we want to. And I saw it on the headline, one of the dailies, and I was like, what kind of restructuring are we going to call for now? And the people calling for restructuring is it about human rights? Is it about secession? Is it about agitation? Is it about what? And if we want to classify these various rights, right to secede, right for agitation, right, where do we go from here?
Well, I'm not sure that the president really wants to restructure Nigeria. Okay. And again, the problem with restructuring, however, is that almost everybody that agitates for restructuring has their own definition of what it should be. Okay. So some would say, some are targeting disintegrating the nation, everybody going on their own. Nobody, they believe that this structure and this system and this amalgamation cannot work.
It's not working.
So those are those extreme people.
Is it part of their right?
It will accept enshrined in the law. It's never been enshrined in the law, though I need to go and check what the constitution was before independence. But as far as I know, 1999 constitution was built on 1979 constitution. Yes. And of course, since the military guys came, they are trying to hold the country together by force.
It's a fiat constitution.
Yes, so it's fiat. So yes, for now, the extant law is that it is not acceptable for any part of Nigeria to say they want to leave Nigeria. Okay. Now I think that we haven't worked hard enough on that union, on this union, such as to say that people want to walk away from the union. Because when you say you want to walk away from the union, invariably you're asking for a lot, and you're basically, if any part of the union believes that you're walking, there are several things you have to deal with. If any part of the union believes that you're walking away is going to hurt them, then we want to keep you by force, and that was what happened in 1967. The
Biafra War.
In the Biafra War, and again, also you have to check yourself to say, is it the biggest problem we have? Is it because we are together? You have to be sure that you're not acting out of disdain, out of a certain false sense of pride, and you have to ask yourself, have we worked hard enough? Have we had leaders that can actually speak to this issue? Because the communication, those words are very powerful, and it's a consistent and persistent effort that must be made. I personally don't think we've had very persuasive leaders that can, and sincere leaders who can convince us that this structure can work. One of the things I've said is this, that we probably need a bigger country than a smaller country. I mean, you talk about Singapore, you talk about Rwanda, you talk about Switzerland, very small countries. It can be very idyllic. In our scenario here, those who want to leave must also ask themselves, when you leave, are you giving up everything? Because you may not be able to get a deal that says when you leave, you still own the assets on the other side, you still come there and walk around, and you're going to need a visa.
Exactly.
And if you're not given, you're not given. And so you don't want to go through all of that thing that went through in Port Harcourt the other time about abandoned properties, the properties were seized. This is going to be very traumatic. Yeah. So when I look at it, it's going to be a tough call. That's part of restructuring. But I say that there are other aspects of restructuring that we can explore. Okay. For example, on the economic side, you can see that this year, going into next year, the budget, they added what they call a finance bill. And that finance bill is the one that says that every year, we're going to increase these taxes, we're going to reduce these taxes, we're going to incentivize this, we're going to do this, we're going to, so you know what? We used to have that in the military days. Okay. I remember, even as a teenager in the 80s, I remember for every constitution, every budget that was read, usually on the 1st of January or the 31st of December, was a finance bill that would tell you how things would work in the new year. Okay. And then in 1999, we went to sleep. So when people talk about restructuring, I let them know that, we stopped restructuring this country in 1999. All of these things like allocation formula, how the states will interact with the local government, we stopped thinking in 1999. there are aspects of that law that can be, even things like derivation formula, the 13% thing. I think Obasanjo tried to tweak with it around 2005 before he left in 2006, 7, and then we basically stopped thinking. So we could take a more active role in our development of our nation through the instruments of our budget, through some sort of yearly review of where we stand and so on. I think those lacunas are the things that we should explore as a people.
Wonderful. It's been so nice speaking with you, Mr. Tokpe Fashwa.
Welcome, sir.
I hope when I have a need to call you, you will still respond again.
Absolutely.
That is where Spectacle will stop today on Television Nigerian. Remember what he said, one of the best restructuring method or way of restructuring the country is through the economic means. And once that is done, we are good to go. Thank you for watching, and stay with us tomorrow again for another episode. I've been your host, Daniel Atai. Welcome to Spectacle on Television Nigeria. I am your host, Daniel Atai.